Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I'd like to say this is done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah Allah accepts this video, and whatever mistake I have done, it is due to me, and whatever correct things that I have written, it is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So saying this, let me introduce you to the topic. The topic is HIV. On the left you can see the actual virus and in its relation to Islam, and here is the symbol of Islam, the Holy Quran. So is there any correlation? That's the question. And then of course inshallah we'll go more into it. How is there any correlation? Well, the first question, is there any correlation? According to modern science, what does it say? There is correlation. And if you see here, I've put in brackets grey 2004, and you will inshallah see many more of these. These are basically references, in-text references, and at the end there's a reference list where inshallah you can go and check these references for yourself. So there is, according to modern science. So what is the correlation? Is it negative? Is it positive? Is it when Muslims are present in a place there's more HIV, or is there less? What is the correlation? So according to this person, Gray 2004, a scientist, he said among 38 Sub-Saharan African countries, the percentage of Muslims within countries negatively predicted HIV prevalence. In other words, this means that when you go to countries that have higher Muslim percentage, then there's lower HIV prevalence, alhamdulillah. And this is in regards to just Sub-Saharan Africa. This test was just in regards to Sub-Saharan Africa, where they have relatively similar conditions, where most of the countries there are poor, and they have similar environments, although the central part of Africa, it's got more rainforests, I would say, and the lower parts, so the South African region, is more desertish. But they're pretty similar, like in economic terms and cultural terms and all this. Except religion terms, there's variation and other things as well. Anyway, let's keep going. So what was the coefficient of determination value, which is symbolized as r square, which you can see in the bracket? So coefficient of determination is the r square. The r square value for the correlation was 0.69. Now what does this mean? First of all, what does r square even mean? What is the coefficient of determination? R square values can be between 0 to 1. The closer to 1, then the more stronger is the relationship between the two things you are testing. In this case, it is percentage of Muslims in a country and HIV prevalence. So in science, generally when there's, let's say, 0.23 R square value, they say it's a very strong correlation, and they start investigating, because the correlation is not mere coincidence. That's what they understand. It's very strong. So alhamdulillah, this one is 0.69, which is relatively extremely strong, alhamdulillah, this R square value. So showing that Muslims in a land in Africa have a significant impact on HIV. There's a significant relationship. So what other statistical evidence can we gain from the paper, grade 2004? Well, we find that F equals 10.6, DF equals 24, and P is less than 0.00005. Now, most people probably don't understand this. I, being a science student, don't quite understand everything in detail when what's known here, but I do know this for certain. p-value, which is shown here, if it's less than 0.05, that means the relationship you see is not mere coincidence. There's a significance in this. So alhamdulillah, R1 is less than 0.05, and it's not just less than it, but it's far from it. Far from that 0.05 value, which shows that Muslim percentage in a country and HIV prevalence is extremely related. It's not just something you can brush off. Of course, I said here at least in Sub-Saharan Africa, because the paper tests only Sub-Saharan countries, but a logical thinker would say that this should also, like, there's Muslims in other regions and lack of Muslims in other regions, there should also be some sorts of relationship there. Why would it only be in a certain geographic position? So we've looked at the statistical evidence, but different people learn differently, so it's also important to have visual understanding. So let's look at the visual. This is the first visual understanding. So on the x-axis there's percentage Muslims within a country, and on the y-axis there's HIV prevalence. So as we see, alhamdulillah, when we as we increase the Muslim percentage, HIV prevalence decreases. Now I need to make this clear. The test was not done such that they were waiting in a period of time and testing how much Muslims were in a certain geographic location over time. They done this in one place, and the values that they got were at a single time, where they're just comparing the percentage of Muslims in different countries. So yeah, just in case people thought that this was being tested over time, where countries where Muslim percentage increased and then they got these values. It's just for a specific time, looking at different countries. So here is more for visual learners, and again there's some references. So on the left is the HIV prevalence as of 2009, and on the right is the Muslim percentage in Sub-Saharan Africa as of 2010. Now on the left, let's analyze it. First of all, where is Sub-Saharan Africa? The map on the right actually gives a good idea of where Sub-Saharan Africa is. Everything that's shown there is Sub-Saharan Africa. So you can see the Arabic nations, they're not included in the Sub-Saharan African region. They're removed. So that's just basically what Sub-Saharan Africa is. So you won't see Egypt, you won't see Morocco, and so on. If they were placed there, believe me, as you can see on the map on the left, the R-square value would have been even higher. They would have shown even greater correlations. So let me see. So before, see how I said that Africa, there's different environments. So let's say the middle part, it was rainforest, so this part is rainforest, and then this part is sand. Let's say some people could say that, desert, sorry. Some people could say that it's the desert that's allowing for more HIV prevalence, but you have to remember that apart from Sub-Saharan Africa, if we look at the Northern African region, it's basically desert. So, but alhamdulillah, they have a very small prevalence of HIV, less than 0.1%. So you can't blame it on the ecosystem, just the ecosystem. As shown by Gray 2004, it has a significant association with Islam. So when we look at the map on the left, we see that the countries that have high HIV prevalence are those in the southern region. So all this part, and you also see this part has a high HIV prevalence relative to the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa. So if we analyze which countries these are, so it's basically these countries. you see that majority of them have 0 to 9% Muslims. But when you go to Mozambique, there's 29% Muslim, and Tanzania 39% Muslim. But at the same, and also when we look at this region, which is here, we see it's also a small percentage of Muslims there. But keep in mind, this region, it's lower than these regions in HIV prevalence, and I'm assuming that's due to Christianity being more dominant in these regions, because it's not just Islam that has principles that can lower HIV. Christianity has very similar principles if they're followed. When they're not followed, then you get these results. And I think Muslims tend to follow their religion more, and that's why you see there's a decrease in Muslim lands. So when we see the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa, we see the lowest regions are these ones here, and this, and Madagascar here. Madagascar has low Muslim percentage. I haven't checked out the reason for this, but I'm assuming it would be a dominant Christian country, or they have ethical rules where it limits HIV prevalence, or it's simply that the HIV virus hasn't actually reached there, but I doubt that. I doubt that because it's reached all over the world. Why wouldn't it be reached there? Now we see the places where there's low HIV. It's these purple regions, and alhamdulillah they're 90 to 100% Muslim. So this explains why there's relatively low HIV prevalence. And this place is also relatively low, Madagascar, but it's not really a Muslim region. It could be due to the ethical practice they have. But in science you have to understand there's always these exceptions. These rules, they're bound to be broken basically. But as a general rule, as Islam increases in a land, HIV prevalence does decrease, in at least Sub-Saharan Africa. So here I ask the question, do you see the correlation now? I have said if you are open-minded, you should agree with the correlation after reading all the references that I have shown in the previous slides. But if you are closed-minded, as many people can be, then nothing that I show you will make you agree, because the mind is closed. How is anything going to enter it? So it's up to you. Now let's move on. So what do these results imply? This shows that there is something in Islam or Muslims that prevents HIV. What is known in science in regards to risks that increase HIV transmission? So here is showing some of them: IV drug users, unprotected anal sex, and sexual promiscuity. So what is IV drug users? Basically, it's those who use drugs insert into the body using needles, and the needles become contaminated with blood which carry the HIV, and it gets transported to others. And another factor is unprotected anal sex, which has been shown to easily transmit diseases from one person to another, especially the person who's receiving the anal sex, more so than the one that's doing it. And sexual promiscuity, of course, it increases risk of HIV transmission, because imagine you have multiple partners. Each night you have another woman that you're having sexual relationships with. There is a good chance that you're gonna have the HIV transmitted to you. And here are the references to go to: Koch 1999, now don't laugh at that, and Hardy 1987. How does Islam relate to the risks for HIV transmission? So we looked at the risk. How does it relate to them? So for the drug users, so these are mainly abusers, like or even if they're not abusers, I think they're mainly abusers. That's what I know, but I could be wrong. So in Islam, it is haram to destroy yourself with drugs, alcohol, or any other intoxicants, as shown in the Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 219. So Muslims, being those that are knowledgeable, would not take use in IV drug use. they have prayer instead to relieve them of stress, So this would decrease HIV transmission in that sense. Anal sex, of course, haram in Islam. In the Quran, it doesn't explicitly say it, from my knowledge. Although once when I was small, I remember reading it, but I couldn't quite find the verse. I've been searching for it, not extensively, but quite significantly. But it's clear in the hadith, of course, in the Quran says, follow what the Prophet ﷺ said. So it's clear in the hadith you can't have anal sex, and the Quran gives hints on that. And thereby HIV transmission being reduced because anal sex is forbidden. And sexual promiscuity, of course, Islam limits sexual relations by setting the boundary within marriage. And if you are in war and you have captive slaves, then you can have sexual relationship with slaves. And this can be found throughout Surah Al-Nisa of the Quran. Therefore, let's make some conclusion. Islam removes many factors that increase the risk of HIV infection. Thus, this explains why HIV infection decreases as Muslim percentage increases in Sub-Saharan Africa. Another procedure that decreases HIV transmission is circumcision. Alhamdulillah. So there's compelling evidence that circumcision decreases the risk of heterosexual transmission of HIV. This is based on World Health Organization, which bases its findings from scientific peer-reviewed articles. Now, just to give a context, there are some scientists who try to discredit those works, but alhamdulillah they've been unsuccessful. The majority they can do is say that like what they're doing is questioning the scientific procedure that they're using to get these claims, but they haven't actually discredited or anything. And also there's one report that showed that those that were circumcised, I believe it was in Denmark, had higher no, sorry, it was in Puerto Rico, I think this test was done. Those who had circumcision had higher HIV, not significantly, but they did have higher. But so they were like, they're trying to use that to discredit Islam, I mean circumcision, sorry. But what they did not really analyze is that those that were circumcised had significantly higher anal sex activity than those that were not circumcised. And anal sex, from my knowledge, it's a greater risk if you're circumcised and you do anal sex. It's not going to help you that much, Circumcision is for vaginal intercourse, protection against that more. So yeah, alhamdulillah, and yeah, so that's just some of the things that I would try to say. And Muslims, alhamdulillah, they get circumcised, so this would decrease HIV transmission. So before I actually, as a scientist, I like to make predictions. Like if what I'm saying is true, then there should be certain things that follow with it. So what I predicted is that if our explanation based on facts is true, then we should expect that HIV infections should be lower in Muslim populated regions when compared to non-Muslim populated regions throughout the world. In the context that we look in similar economic environments, you know what I mean? Like similar economic factors and all this. So we shouldn't compare, let's say, third world countries such as Sub-Saharan Africa to Australia or the United States of America. Although we can, but it's better to look in similar countries. So I looked at the world in relation to the HIV prevalence, and this was in 2006. So again, you see here's the key showing how much is adult prevalence rate. So you see again, Africa, it's really bad. But some other things, I just pointed arrows to them without actually knowing the countries, except maybe I knew Russia, but to remove bias, I just pointed arrows before ever looking at the countries in the first place, to just remove bias. So this is the first country I looked at. This is the second, third, fourth, and some of these are actually intermixed. So anyway, as in the countries, there's more than one countries in a single arrow. I didn't look at these countries because I'm pretty confident that there's not a lot of Muslims in these countries. So what am I to compare them to? They're not in the same geographical region. They've got different environments. So I didn't look at them. But I looked at Russia because Russia is close to the Middle East, and also there's some countries that surround it that are Muslim countries. So let's look at it. So we had Russia and Ukraine here with a significant amount of HIV. This Russia, I believe Ukraine was this yellow part here. And we saw countries that surround them that had a high Muslim percentage. Oops, what's this? Do you want to change the color scheme to improve performance? Nope. So we saw that actually you can see yourself whether the Muslim countries nearby have a high percentage of HIV. And the next one we looked at was India, which is this yellow part here, which is about 0.5 to 1% HIV prevalence. Nepal, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, which had high HIV prevalence relative to other countries surrounding. And then we had Papua New Guinea, which was a part of, I'm not sure if it was a part of Indonesia, to be honest, but I haven't researched it, so I might sound like a fool, but nonetheless it's very close to Indonesia in geographic location. So what we saw from the rest of the world map is that, again, those who are seriously affected by HIV transmission were non-Muslims when compared to the surrounding Muslims. Now I'll give you an example. For example, when we look at the Indian subcontinent, which is here, we see that India has a significant HIV prevalence, but the country that is in between, like surrounded by India basically, is here Bangladesh, where you see that it has less than 0.1% HIV prevalence, yet the geographic location and all that is the same. So you have to question, why is this so? The most logical explanation I can think of is that it's again due to Islam. Because you look at the right, non-Muslim countries, Nepal and all this, and you look at the left, Indian, which has a high amount of Muslims, but again it's a majority non-Muslim country, but you have something in the middle, and things that go across it have a high HIV prevalence relative to Bangladesh. So you have to question it. So it's pretty clear that it's Islam related. Although you'd have to research this as well, but to the open-minded person who doesn't want to deny the truth, it's pretty clear. And other countries that were like that was Indonesia, less than 0.1% had HIV. But then you have a neighboring country, Papua New Guinea, which is even connected to Indonesia. It's got a significant HIV population. So let's just emphasize the point. So let's just give a final conclusion. Adherence to the Islamic principles will inshallah prevent HIV infections and therefore AIDS. Inshallah this has benefited Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And I give you peace. May peace be upon you, and may everyone find the truth, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. And these are the references, of course, if those who are skeptical of what I had said would like to research them.